Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you've been glued to the news this May of 2026, you've probably got some serious geopolitical whiplash right now. The headlines surrounding the US and Iran are moving at lightning speed, and honestly, they're completely contradictory. Literally 1 minute we're hearing about a highly anticipated peace deal, and the very next, breaking news banners are screaming about military action and heightened alerts. Untangling this kind of geopolitical knot means we have to look past those flashing headlines and really break down the mechanics of what is happening on the ground, in the negotiating rooms and back home in Washington. Today, we're going strictly by the source material to try and make sense of an incredibly volatile situation.
So let's dive right into this, because this question is the central baffling paradox of the whole thing. How do two global powers sit down to negotiate a high-stakes peace deal while they are simultaneously launching military strikes against one another? It completely defies our traditional understanding of conflict resolution, right? Usually you stop shooting, then you sit at the table. But right now, military leverage and diplomatic talks are happening at the exact same time. It creates this remarkably fragile environment where just one single miscalculation could derail the whole shebang.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. First, strikes amidst peace talks. Second, the timeline of escalation. Third, core diplomatic sticking points. Fourth, domestic political pressures. And fifth, the future of the truce.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, strikes amidst peace talks. Just look at the split reality. On one hand, recent reporting confirms the U.S. has launched what it calls self-defense strikes inside Iran. But then, running completely parallel to that, U.S. and Iranian negotiators are actively hashing out a ceasefire proposal. It's a carrot-and-stick approach, pushed to the absolute extreme. Both sides are using kinetic military action to try and beef up their negotiation positions. Essentially, they're communicating with missiles while simultaneously communicating with diplomats.
Setting the tone on the American side is this quote from President Trump. He stated he will either sign a great, meaningful deal with Iran or no deal at all. Now, our sources actually indicate that despite the bombs dropping, the administration is expressing a lot of optimism here, even teasing that a deal could be very close. But this all-or-nothing framing creates a real high-wire act. The administration is signaling confidence in a breakthrough, leveraging those recent strikes to project strength, while fiercely maintaining they'll walk away in a heartbeat if their exact terms aren't met.
But, and this brilliantly illustrates the deep disconnect we're seeing, Iran's reported stance is fundamentally different. Sources report that Iran not only disagrees with the whole "a deal is imminent" assessment, but they've actually issued warnings that they're willing to push the war beyond the region if the attacks resume. This contrast is absolutely crucial. You have one side projecting diplomatic optimism and the other threatening an expansion of the conflict. It shows just how incredibly wide the gap between the two negotiating tables really is.
Which brings us to Section 2. The timeline of escalation.
Let's actually walk through how quickly this has unfolded. Day 1, the U.S. launches its self-defense strikes. Almost immediately on Day 2, Iran responds, claiming they hit a U.S. base in direct retaliation. Immediate tit-for-tat kinetic escalation. But then, giving everyone absolute geopolitical whiplash, Day 3 brings reports that both sides are actively pushing to extend a 60-day truce. This rapid-fire cycle from offensive strikes to retaliation straight into pushing for a ceasefire is totally defining this crisis.
And while they talk peace, neither side is exactly putting their weapons down. The source material notes that Iran is still publicly vowing retaliation. Meanwhile, the U.S. is keeping its readiness high, with fascinating reports coming out that the military is actively conducting advanced war games using artificial intelligence. I mean, nobody wants to look like they're negotiating from a position of weakness, right? So the military posturing is continuing at full throttle, right alongside the truce talks.
Moving right along to Section 3, core diplomatic sticking points.
Now, what's really interesting here are the actual roadblocks to a deal. There are two massive geopolitical hurdles, impartially laid out right here. First, reopening the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the most critical maritime choke points in the world for global oil. Any disruption there sends massive shockwaves through the global economy. Second is the status of Iran's highly enriched uranium, or HEU. These are not minor details. They are fundamental, deeply entrenched issues of global economic stability and nuclear proliferation.
To give this a little historical context, our sources highlight commentary from former Obama advisor Ben Rhodes, which really shows the stark contrast in strategies. Back in 2015, the Iran deal relied on a long-term, multilateral, slow-burn diplomatic framework. Fast forward to 2026, and the approach is defined by direct military strikes, maximum pressure, and these highly volatile brinkmanship-style ultimatums. It is a fundamental shift in how the U.S. handles geopolitics, moving from prolonged diplomacy to rapid-fire, high-stakes negotiation.
Let's look homeward for Section 4, domestic political pressures.
Because, the tension isn't just happening overseas. It's right inside the administration itself. Recently, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard resigned. And according to the reporting, this happened right amidst rumors that the president might relaunch the Iran war. This reveals some truly fascinating internal friction and debate at the very highest levels of U.S. leadership. When your intelligence chief steps down during a crisis, it strongly signals that the path forward is deeply contested, even within the White House.
Add to that internal friction what everyday Americans are dealing with right now. Economically, the public is frustrated. Inflation and high gas prices are hitting Memorial Day travel hard, reaching levels we haven't seen since around 2022. Politically, things are incredibly polarized, with headlines dominated by bipartisan backlash over a DOJ anti-weaponization fund and a huge focus on the upcoming midterms. Why does that matter for Iran? Well, domestic economic pain puts immense pressure on the administration to resolve the conflict and stabilize oil markets, while all that political noise severely limits the political capital a president has to spend on a foreign war.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, the future of the truce.
The magic number right now is 60. That's the proposed length in days of the ceasefire currently on the table. But here's the catch. Our sources explicitly state that neither President Trump nor Iran's leadership have given this 60-day truce final approval yet. They are holding the entire world in suspense, using this pending deadline to squeeze out every last drop of negotiating leverage before signing on the dotted line.
So the crucial point here is absolutely perfectly summarized by Senator Marco Rubio. He said, "Significant progress has been made, but not final progress." That hits the nail on the head. That's the absolute definition of the limbo state we find ourselves in right now. We're closer to peace than we were when missiles were flying, but we are a long way from the finish line. The framework is there, but the final, binding agreement remains tantalizingly out of reach.
Which leaves us with one massive critical question to ponder. What happens to global stability if this 60-day truce actually fails? If talks collapse over the Strait of Hormuz or enriched uranium and all that domestic pressure boils over? The fallback is a return to active military conflict with a very real threat of regional expansion. The stakes literally could not be higher. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this deep dive into the source material helped clear up those crazy headlines. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the facts, and I'll see you next time.